So, good morning, everyone. Good late midday, everyone. We have a lot of joiners coming in from different parts of Europe, actually. So it's great to see that we have quite an extensive group of different nationalities joining in. Welcome to our webinar regarding the carbon accounting market in the Nordics, a bit of a comparison of how are we doing. So firstly, just to introduce myself, my name is Eric, and I am an account executive here at Carbon+Alt+Delete for the Nordics and also Central Eastern Europe. Of course, we have a lot of existing partners also here today, but for those who are not familiar with Carbon+Alt+Delete, we are a carbon accounting software based in Belgium, designed, and we work exclusively with consultancies. Today, I'm not alone though, so very happy to welcome also our second speaker today, who will bring more of a point of view from the really a consulting side, as Elinor will surely introduce herself in a bit. But very excited to have you here, Elinor. So I will give the microphone to you so you can introduce yourself and Parilo.
Yes, thank you so much, Eric. It's really fun to be here. Like Eric said, my name is Elinor, and I do mainly two things. First, I'm a sustainability consultant, freelancing, and I'm also running Parilo, where we help companies find and switch ESG systems for carbon accounting, supply chain due diligence, sustainability reporting. So we help companies reduce the risk of investing in the wrong ESG system. And I'm based in Sweden. So that's some short things about me. So over to you again, Eric.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Just a quick question: how did you prepare for the webinar today? Do you have any like pre-webinar rituals that you do, or?
I actually listened to my Feel Good Spotify list right before this webinar, and we had some technical difficulties. I want to warn you, my computer said it wants to restart in 5 minutes. So if I disappear while you're talking, you know why. But I'm prepared since I listened to good music before the webinar.
Perfect. That's good. It's good to feel good, especially since I think we both had a bit of a Teams technical issue before.
Yes.
So fingers crossed that it will go fine. But moving first to some housekeeping rules of the webinar of today. So there is the chat. As I'm presenting the full screen, I unfortunately do not have visibility on the chat and the Q&A. So Elinor, I think you can see the questions. So if there's in the Q&A, I will let you do the question asking. Your camera is switched off as standard, and also your microphone is switched off. So if you have any questions, just interact through the chat and Q&A. For all the questions that we're not able to answer today, we will follow up afterwards as well. So all of the burning questions that you might have will be answered by offline, if nothing else. So I think we're ready to get started. So first, we have the agenda of today. I will start by going a bit through the current state of GHG accounting in the Nordics and discuss a bit the CSRD implementation status also in the Nordics, because of course we know how important this is when it comes to the carbon accounting as well. Then I will give the floor to Elinor, who will be explaining a bit more on the common maturity caps, especially where do companies still struggle in the carbon accounting process of end clients, but also consultancies. And of course, with her great background in consulting, she will be able to give a lot of very hard-hitting details from her experiences. After that, I will just quickly have a couple of things to say about Nordics versus the rest of the EU, and just to finish up with some key takeaways before the Q&A. So, as we get started, we would like to first start with a question. So, on the screen you see now, you see a QR code or a Menti code. So you can go to mentimeter.com and use the code to enter the questions. And you will be able to then basically look into the different, you will be able to see the different answers. We want to start a bit on the positive side. So we wanted to see basically, what do you see being successful in the GHG accounting in your projects? So here a lot of let's say, negativity sometimes, of course, when it comes to the last year on how the omnibus has developed. So let's start with something positive, right? Elinor, what would you say is something that we were going to see? We see already some answers coming in, but do you have any of your own positive things to share?
Yeah, I would say that I feel that a lot of companies are moving along this learning curve and feel that, okay, we are starting to get a hang of this. We are starting to understand where we are good, where we need to improve, what things we have under control, what things, yeah. So I think moving along the learning curve and becoming better and better and better.
Yes, absolutely. I feel the same, and for me, of course, I'm speaking from a commercial background, so from our conversations with our partners. But what I absolutely feel, especially for the Nordics, is really the willingness to do, right? So the culture of we want to report on sustainability metrics, we want to do carbon accounting, not only because of course it helps your company, but also because it's a like a feeling that the companies have that kind of responsibility feeling, and that's something that I like a lot. See some answers coming in, and I see, of course, you just mentioned education is one of the big ones, so it has been mentioned a few times. I see Scope 3 data. Would love to understand, of course, what do you mean? My interpretation is that you are happy that there's more Scope 3 data available, but of course, if it's something else, please interact through the chat and let us know what you mean with the Scope 3 data. What do you think, Elinor? Does this kind of also, besides of what you said, do you see this kind of aligns with what you feel of the market currently?
Yeah, 100%. Clients and companies covering more and more of the 15 Scope 3 categories, really capturing their large emission categories. So absolutely.
Great. That is great to see. All right. So just wanted to give a bit of a quick questionnaire to see what you're feeling positive about. So now we can jump into the meat and bones of the presentation, of the webinar. So how do we see current state of the GHG accounting in the Nordics? Now, I want to here also mention that, of course, like I mentioned, I come from a commercial background, so I am kind of sharing what I see from the discussions with our partners and with their end clients as well. And also Elinor has shared her part from really the consulting and the hands-on part, and we came from like a few points that we really see the state of how it is happening now. So I think the first main point, and it's just what I mentioned, is that there is a high awareness of climate reporting requirements and a willingness to really meet those requirements. Of course, the requirements are the European CSRD. Then we have also the more low barrier to entry, the VSME requirements, which we see especially in the Nordics is quite a common way to kind of get started with your reporting. And then we might have some local requirements. This is good to see that many companies already report in scope 1 and 2, but of course, these are generally known to be the easier scopes. But when it comes to scope 3, it is mostly included in the Nordics, but often at a very high level. And maybe you also can share, Elinor, your feeling about it, but indeed, from my point of view and from my understanding with discussions is really that the importance of scope 3 within the reporting is understood as part of the requirements. But especially when it comes to kind of offering it to the end clients, the financial benefit is sometimes a bit difficult to prove because of course, we know that you want to use that data to something. And when you're able to kind of show to an end customer that, hey, if you do a detailed scope 3 analysis, you will find potential improvements within your value chain and optimizations. And currently, this is quite difficult to sell because there's not necessarily too many use cases, but there is definitely the potential to improve in this. I don't know how you see it.
Yeah, 100%. That it's easier 100% to improve what you have full control of, and that it's much more challenging to improve the things you don't have control of.
Yeah, exactly. And then this we know very well with Elinor, both working with a lot of softwares. There is still a very heavy reliance on spreadsheets and manual processes. And of course, it is a good point to start. And I mean, Excels they have been kind of the cornerstone of getting started with carbon accounting, but the time savings now moving to really dedicated softwares is something that really is a point where I think all over Europe can be improved, but also in the Nordics. How we kind of compare to the neighbors. Let's start like the sun. So we start from east and go towards the west. From my own home country, of course, Finland, but I will also kind of tackle Sweden together, unless it's ice hockey, where we are very different. In general, with our neighbor, we are quite aligned when it comes to the culture of how we do carbon accounting, but also generally all of the ESG reporting requirements. So I have seen that in Sweden and Finland, especially fast has been the CSRD adoption and the VSME as well. And there has been always this very strong feeling of we have to be sustainable. In Finland also, we see more and more smaller companies moving towards reporting, even if it's scope 1 and 2. So that's something very positive to see, that it's not only the big companies that have to report because of the requirements of the CSRD, even if they were watered down, but also small companies are moving towards this. Elinor, I'm going to tag you in for Sweden. You are the expert in that geographical area. So how do you feel about Sweden?
I feel that we have had a sense of being like not the best, but really high up on top 3, top 5, that we are in the front. But maybe that we need to start thinking, are we really still there? So I want to challenge the people in here that are from Sweden to think a little bit differently. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? I hope so. But we have to think and reassess.
And of course, I spoke very highly of Finland. Of course, there's always opportunities to improve, and that's one thing that I think for all of the Nordics is that a lot of the European countries look towards us as kind of let's say inspiration when it comes to sustainability, and it's great, but we cannot take that for granted, and we have to keep improving and pushing ourselves to improve even further. Going towards a neighbor to the south, so to Denmark. For Denmark, of course, strong culture of CSRD adoption as well. I think this applies to all of the Nordic countries, but what I have seen with my discussions with our partners in Denmark is really how important transparency is in Denmark. There's a very strong governance focus, and this comes, of course, in this, for example, our discussions with Carbon+Alt+Delete, how the software works and so on, but also in general with all of the carbon accounting, is that transparency, documentation, and auditability is so important in Denmark. And that's actually, when it comes to discussions, it's one of the main points that we usually focus on. For Norway, even though they are not part of the EU, but of course being close to the Nordics in general, but also because of the collaboration through the European Economic Area, very closely aligned with the CSRD and other metrics that are used for climate calculations and other sustainability reporting. For Iceland, I included it, but I'm going to be fully transparent. I do not have too much personal experience with the Icelandic market. I am aware that there is a smaller market, of course, and you do have in Iceland some reporting needs, but however, would love to hear if somebody in this webinar has any experience with Iceland, can share with the rest of the group here. Would love to hear in the chat how you see the Icelandic market. So jumping forward, we had a quick look into how basically the Nordics are doing, a bit of comparison. We are a bit ahead of time. So just Elinor, are there any questions that have come up in the chat so far?
Not what I can see, actually. So if you got something, feel free to write and we will do our best to answer.
Perfect. Well, in that case, I think we can then move towards indeed the common maturity caps where we see, and I will give the floor to you, Elinor.
That sounds really good. And I think I dodged the restart my computer thing. I'm pressing snooze every 5 minutes. I think if we keep our thumbs crossed, that I can stay here the whole webinar. I wish so.
It's like waking up in the morning.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I did snooze 3 times today. That was very nice. So keep on snoozing. That's the thing. And I think we can move on to the next slide since we got another question for you, another Menti. And like Eric did in the beginning, we wanted to start on the positive note, and we will come back to a positive note at the end of the webinar as well. But now we want to learn, develop, evaluate ourselves, and really think what part of our carbon accounting processes that actually are the most challenging today. So we have written a couple of options here connected to consistent methodologies, auditability, data ownership, collaboration, resource and time awareness. And if you feel that you have a challenge that don't really fit into any of these boxes, write them in the chat. And we can see so far that auditability has 0 answers. Now resource and time awareness have 4, consistent methodologies have 4. I'm actually quite surprised that auditability has 0, but I also know that it's something that comes further along in the process, maybe not something that a lot of companies are doing in the beginning when it comes to carbon accounting. Yeah, so this was really interesting. Do you have any thoughts of these results, Eric?
I have to say I'm a bit surprised on the auditability side because I expected that maybe it was a bit more of a challenge, but could it be indeed that then there are basically instruments that really help the process in a really help the process in a way that it's not a challenge anymore? Has it maybe in like the last year moved towards not being a challenge, but more of like an opportunity that has been solved? That's something quite interesting. I see consistent methodologies keeps going up. That does not surprise me, to be honest, at all. And I mean, resource and time awareness is something that I hear a lot, right? So coming from the software point of view. So that's of course something that we will tackle a bit more in detail. But what about yourself? Do you have any thoughts on why auditability is at 0 currently?
I'm not really sure. Maybe a lot of companies are not there yet. Or like you said, it's working well. It's going easy. And then that's really good thing. And I also see here in the chat that Tom wrote, for me, when there has been changes in client teams, we often fall behind again with data ownership. And I completely agree. Sustainability teams and people working with sustainability, there aren't so many quite often. So the teams are quite small. So when one person change work position, change position or something, it affects a lot. It does.
Absolutely. I think we're even going to deep dive a bit into that.
Yes.
Don't want to spoil too much, but that we will deep dive into it. But indeed, that's something that we hear a lot as well. So it's great to feel as an important part of the process, but indeed, it's only worth it that if you can, somebody coming after you can also follow that process, right?
100%. So should we move on maybe to the next slide?
Let's do it. So here we have the same. So moving on to the next slide, the floor is yours, Elinor.
That's perfect. And here we see when me and Eric have prepped for this webinar, these are the most common maturity gaps that we see where companies still struggle connected to each of these boxes. But before digging into them, we really want to emphasize that these maturity gaps exist even in the most ambitious companies, the companies that really have everything under control, that have been doing this for a lot of years, and so on and so on. But rather that these different maturity gaps exist at different point of times in different companies. So as you are moving along this learning curve, different challenging different challenges will arise at some point in time. So if you experience any of these points that we will go through, no worries. It's a learning curve. It's a process. Trust the process. And if we take the first box first, with consistent methodologies, we wanted to talk about that we see a high reliance on estimates and averages, that we see limited supplier-specific data, inconsistent category coverage. There we're talking about mostly the different scope 3 categories, and then difficulty explaining uncertainty. And like we said before, everything is a learning curve in the beginning. So I'm sure all of you know, who have been doing carbon calculations for some years, that the change between the first year and the second year was huge. The change between, oh, let's press snooze again. Yes, it worked. Okay, good. The change between the first and second year was huge. And then the change between the second year and third year was also pretty large, but some smaller. And that keeps evolving. So since a lot of things are changing in the beginning, it is hard to compare between the different years, but it's a part of the process. And like Tom, you commented before in the chat, teams working with sustainability are often quite small. And when you're working with your clients, maybe you don't have so many contact persons at the company. So when one person disappears, it really affects. And then if you move on to the second box about audit readiness, once again, everything is still quite new. And when, at least I can experience sometimes, when you've been doing carbon calculations for a while, you don't really realize until maybe 1-2 years later that, oh, this, I should have documented this more carefully, since now I don't really remember when I was doing the carbon calculations or documented the process or looked for emission factors or whatever it was. It was fresh in my head. I remembered it, but then 1 or 2 years later, I don't remember it. So it's so important to document. And here, if we look at the points in the slide, we see usually that data exists, but audit trails are weak, and that we have limited documentation of assumptions. The changes are not always documented, and that manual calculations are hard to reproduce. So, and this also becomes more and more challenging when we don't have standardized processes or systems yet. And then if we move on to the third box about data ownership and collaboration, if we look at the points in the slide, we have sustainability consultants and teams maybe compiling the data. And then we maybe have a situation where finance owns reporting credibility. And then we maybe have a situation where procurement holds the supplier relationship. And then the ownership and accountability is often unclear, since there's so many different people normally not working with sustainability and sustainability data that will work with sustainability data in carbon calculations. And that's a good thing. I mean, we want to spread awareness of sustainability. We don't want only 1 and 2 people in a company or a few consultants working with sustainability. We want the whole organization to be involved. We want it to be a part of the business strategy and not something at the side. I think everyone here agrees with me, but still it becomes a challenge when we are many people involved in the same project. And also one thing when doing carbon calculations, if you do it only once per year, you forget a lot in 12 months. You do. And that also makes it even more challenging for the people not working with sustainability on a regular basis to remember, oh my God, what did I do 1 year ago? It's challenging. It's hard. We're all humans. And then we take the last box about resource and time awareness. And here we want to talk to that there's maybe a low understanding of the time required to calculate the carbon footprint. Maybe we have an underestimation of internal resources needed, and then maybe there's heavy dependence on a few key individuals, and then maybe limited visibility of efforts across departments. And I'm sure that all that are consultants in here know exactly how much time it takes to calculate a carbon footprint for a company in this industry of this size that has this experience in carbon accounting, or at least that you're really good at making tight estimates. But if you work but if you ask an in-house sustainability professional, I'm not sure that that person has the ability to give the same exact estimation. And that's not something that is weird, since in-house sustainability professionals don't time track in the same way as sustainability consultants do. But that also leads to that maybe we don't have the same sense of how long things actually takes. And also when we have all these people working together, many departments, that increases the risk of deadlines not being kept. And then also, I think everybody in here knows that when it's time for the first quarter of the year, we have been back from our Christmas and New Year celebration, then it's time to dig into compiling all the data. And it's usually pretty short deadlines. It should usually be finished mid-February, end February, mid-March. It's a lot to do in the beginning of the year. And now, Eric, I'm also really curious, do you usually spend time talking about one or a few of these challenges in your work? Do you see that one of these are more common?
Yes. So when I have these discussions for example, how can we sell carbon accounting and actually sustainability in general for end clients, I think really the ownership and collaboration is one of the most important parts, because the way that you can get a full company to be part of this initiative is really that everybody feels responsible, everybody feels that they have ownership of the actions of the company. And if you look at, for example, I think one of the big leaders in this is Patagonia, is a brand known for the responsibility, the social responsibility, sustainability, and so on. And the whole, everybody within the company is kind of, I don't want to say indoctrinated because it sounds so negative, but they are taught into this way of thinking. And that's why you have a company that is able to move fast when it comes to sustainability initiatives, and also make sure that everybody within the company feels responsible to be basically part of this positive change within the company. And I'm talking, of course, from Carbon+Alt+Delete perspective, but we have the same, right? So within Carbon+Alt+Delete, we take it very seriously. We try to diminish emissions where we can in our travel, in our business travel. And I think that's the way that you can really give that ownership to the employees and to the rest of the team. And then, of course, talking about carbon accounting itself, yes, there should be a few people who are leading it, but if there is kind of this common ownership within the different departments to provide the correct data, that's the way to go. And we talked about, because you were doing a project right now, if I remember correctly, you did like a carbon accounting project as a freelance, and did you time track actually? Do you have any estimation of how much time you spent? Because I think the time awareness is also, it's very easy to overlook because you don't think about it, but when you start actually calculating it, that's the way that you start seeing like, oh wow, I'm spending a lot of time in my Excel. So do you have any visibility on the time you spend?
Yeah, 100%. So one of these client projects I'm having right now is actually doing common calculations manually in Excel, ironically enough, since I, at the other days of the week, work so much with different common calculation systems and ESG systems. It has been a challenge, but it has been fun. And at this client, I have this interim sustainability controller role, you could say. So it's like a hybrid between being a freelancing consultant and being an employed. So I don't usually time track in that way. I time report a set amount of hours per month. But connected to these carbon calculations, I decided for myself that, okay, I want to time track this since I really want to show the organization how much time it takes. And for that specific organization, I think it took 150 hours, and I don't remember exactly what different categories. I sorted the hours into, but it was data collection, it was preparing the Excel sheet, I think it was updating the emission factors, and so on and so on. And this data is so good now, because now I can show black on white that this is how many hours it took, this is how much I cost, this is how much you would save if you invest in a carbon calculation system. So now we have a planned workshop where we will compare the pros and cons, and this data, it don't lie. It's black and white.
Yeah,
That's
we should
the tip.
We should take that time tracking and just put it on kind of the front page of Carbon+Alt+Delete webpage.
Yeah.
So it shows really like, hey. But indeed, I think I fully agree that it's something that takes a lot of time, and however, it's something that you don't notice it until you actually start tracking. And I think that's why having the use cases, as I mentioned before, not only I mentioned in the value chain part for scope 3, but I think use cases is the best way to show the value of of actually any change that you want to do, right? And I think that's kind of the main focus that we should have. But I'm jumping ahead. So I think, of course, we have these 4 blocks, but I think you had some other things to say, so I'm not going to steal your thunder here.
Yeah, I have things to say. No, of course, and you're not stealing my thunder, 100% not. And before going into the positive side, I know both me and Eric have promised you that we will end on a positive note. We really want to emphasize the actual impact, the consequences of these common maturity gaps. Up to the left, you see the box. And then we think that these common maturity gaps leads to that we have differences between reporting periods and a lack of steady state, since the carbon calculation footprints fluctuates too much between each year, or at least much, and that this creates a challenge for the organization to understand. Since these changing methodologies and routines, they undermine consistent messaging and so on, and that this in turns leads to that it's challenging to get buy-in. And if it's one thing I want you to remember today, I think it's this one. I mean, when you have this lack of a steady state, it becomes challenging to set climate targets, since there's lack of reliable underlying data and trustworthy projections, and that it's more challenging to get buy-in for different kinds of investment decisions, since you don't really have a good understanding of the potential return of investment. And this makes it hard to move the sustainability work forward. And now comes the positive things. So Eric, I ask you to switch slide once again. And now we're gonna talk about the different tips on how to improve. And now here you recognize the 4 boxes again. The headlines are exactly the same, but the bullet points are different. So if we go to the first box about consistent methodologies, we want you to expect methodologies to evolve, and we want you to see improvement as a sign of maturity. You remember, as we talked about in the beginning, everyone is moving along this learning curve, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. And I want you to document more than you think, so you actually remember and have the documentation ready so you can communicate all these changes that are happening when you move along the learning curve. And then it's also a tip to recalculate prior data to show improvements. I mean, if you want to make a change, it's really important to communicate why you want to make the change when you have learned something new. And that's sometimes easier when you have the numbers to show. So that's something really good. I'm also looking at my notes here to see if I forgot something.
I'd like to also just jump in here to also mention, like, of course they are challenges, right? And we kind of phrase them in a negative way, but it's important to really not see them as something negative, because they are challenges, but that's just points where you can improve. So of course we've been kind of jumping up and down with the positiveness and negativeness, but let's indeed. So it's important for also, this comes for the consultancies that we work with or with end clients, is that the challenges that you have, be transparent with them and just make them points that where you can improve.
100%, 100%. And then if we also move on to the next box, where both you and me, Eric, were surprised that so many companies didn't have this as a challenge, but it's a good thing. But if you feel that you have this as a challenge, we want you to think that if someone I've never met before will take over my job tomorrow, will they be able to do a good job based on the documentation that currently is available? So we want you to document more than you think and make your reasoning traceable to someone outside of the process. And this isn't a thing of making yourself a less reliable resource to the company or to the client. You could think that if you have everything in your head documented on paper, your head is not needed. That's not the case. It's rather also like you talked about before, Eric, that if you have the capability of making it super crystal clear why you have made different choices, changes, and chosen to do the carbon calculations in a certain way, it's really easy for you to communicate that to your colleagues and to your clients, and that brings trustworthiness. You seem as a person that really knows what you do. When it's easy to understand, people also have an easier time to say, yes, of course, we should make this change. So that's a really good thing.
Absolutely. And nobody, okay, it sounds maybe a bit cliche, but nobody changes the world by themselves. So be collaborative, collaborate with your colleagues, make sure that they can take over if you are not available, and so on. So very important to make it as easy as possible for future, I would say, generations to kind of follow the practices that you've been following.
No, 100%. And that really connects good to the third box as well about data ownership and collaboration. Since if you're doing carbon calculations only once a year, don't stop that. Do it at least every 6 months or every quarter. Or if you're ambitious and feel that you need it every month. So practice, practice, and practice, and move from annual reporting to recurring reporting. And this is because if you create habits, this reduce friction over time, since the last bullet points, repetition fine tunes and calibrates processes. So when you do something, when it becomes a habit, you do it repeatedly, you know exactly what to do. It doesn't demand so much energy from either you, your colleagues, your clients. And when you do something more often than once a year, you also quite often have the time to realize, oh, this is something we can improve. Or, oh, this is a bit weird when we were that we were thinking in this way. Maybe we should change this, that you find improvements moving along the learning curve. So move away from annual reporting. Is that something that you do? And try to make it more often as a practice, since you want to move along this learning curve. And then, guys, we have the last point, and that is connected to resource and time awareness. Like we talked about time reporting in the beginning, we want you to measure effort and not just outcomes. So track time spent on key sustainability processes. I mean, it takes time to time track, so we don't want you to time track everything, but we want you to think which kind of data that you might need in the future as a decision basis when you need to make a change with your team, your colleagues, your client, management team. What data, what historical data would be good to show black on white, and let the data drive expectations. It's really hard to say that that number isn't correct. Statistics don't lie. So let the numbers be your friend. Oh my God, that was so cliche, but I'm saying it. Let the numbers be your friend. And now we have been talking about the Nordics for quite some time now. And Eric, I know that you have prepared some really good thoughts about the broader EU. Should we zoom out?
We should zoom out a bit indeed.
Yeah.
So let's move out towards the rest of Europe. So as many of you might know, Carbon+Alt+Delete, we work quite broadly all around Europe and well, based in Belgium. But I personally work quite a lot with Central Eastern Europe as well, and then hearing from my colleagues who are in the room with me as well right now, from their experiences. How do we kind of in the Nordics, how do we compare towards the rest of the EU? And I think here it's really that in the Nordics there's a really strong enforcement cultures, and that does not only come from indeed from within the companies I mentioned, but also from like the public. We want to consume sustainable brands. We want to support sustainable companies, and that also leads towards a strong enforcement culture of following those different requirements that we follow. So this can be indeed the CSRD or the VSME or any other local requirements. Secondly, is that there's a very high investor and stakeholder scrutiny. And for example, I know that in Denmark, I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but that there was recently, for example, a greenwashing claim of 140,000 Danish kroners because the company was marketing the products as sustainable without having the proper documentation. Of course, I am not 100% sure what happened there, and I don't want to put blame, can be also just not knowing, but it shows that there is a strong enforcement and scrutiny of the brands that say that they're sustainable, but if they get caught of not providing proof to it, there is also consequences to it as well. And also that I have to say that in the Nordics in general, maybe compared to, for example, my experiences in the Central Eastern Europe, greenwashing is much more impactful within the Nordics than when we're looking towards, for example, Southern Europe. Of course, keep in mind, and here a big caveat is that I might be a bit generalizing. So of course there are always individual companies and so on. I'm just sharing my experiences from working with different partners throughout Europe. Secondly, in the Nordics, it is really the public sector and large buyers that lead by example when it comes to asking for example, for carbon accounting of their supplier and their value chain. So public sector is very strong in the Nordics when it comes to making requirements of their suppliers to commit to either targets or to commit to providing carbon accounting yearly. Where for example, in comparison, generally, what I see from the in Eastern Europe and Central Europe is that it is a lot of the within the company's own initiative, a lot of times to kind of provide this carbon accounting. And lastly, when it comes to how the process goes, I have noticed that in the Nordics, the move from really just box ticking the different requirements to actually having substance out of those requirements. And this can be not only reports in, okay, we have to report in the CSRD, so we're just going to make that report. No, we use those reports to really then make a difference and use that data to kind of drive value from the carbon calculations that have been done. However, here I want to go further, and this is kind of where I jump to my key takeaways, is that even though the most Nordic companies meet or aim to meet the requirements that there are, there's not too many that still use that greenhouse gas data really in their business decisions. What do I mean with this? You can find inefficiencies within your value chain of the company, or you can use that GHG transparency effectively as a unique selling proposition. And again, I mentioned Patagonia earlier, but for example, Elinor, do you own any Patagonia clothes yourself?
Two shirts. Been having them for a long time.
long time. And I think I have two of the sweaters that they have.
Yeah.
And I I f- I imagine that you're happy with them, right? You're happy with
Yeah.
the brand, but not only with the clothes, but really with what the brand represents,
Yeah, and it's
right?
also really amazing that even before I started working with sustainability, I knew about it. It was like commonly known. That's good work.
Exactly. So I really think that the big challenge, but again, the opportunity for companies when it comes to using the greenhouse gas data is to use it as a unique selling proposition, because Patagonia, I think they have probably one of the most loyal customer base, and many companies, many brands dream of having that kind of customer loyalty. But that comes from indeed using the transparency of sustainability metrics such as greenhouse gas reporting as a unique selling proposition to your customers. Secondly, of course, I'm gonna went quickly over it, but inefficiencies in the value chain of the company. A lot of companies, when they do a full scope 3 investigation, finding out how what the emissions are, they can find that, hey, we are actually losing money within the value chain. And that's, I mean, if you want to get any decision makers moving, all you need to say, we can save money here, right? Everybody wants to be profitable. So I think that's where it really can be used even better. The greenhouse gas data can be used even better to drive change within companies. So just to kind of wrap up what the key takeaways are from our side is really that I do believe that the next shift is not more reporting. I believe it from my conversations with our partners that the next shift is not more reporting, but better use of the reports. And as I mentioned, use the results to transparently share improvements as wins. But if you have shortcomings, don't hide them. And of course, we want to follow the GHG protocol. You have to be transparent as well. But use these as opportunities to improve. And I think here recently Finnair, so the Finnish airline provider, did their sustainability report for the year, and they were transparent. And I really enjoyed reading the recap, for example, that they were transparent about the fact that their emissions grew because the majority of their emissions come from fuels related to indeed to the airline travel. However, what did they do? They used this as an opportunity to basically be part of a pilot project of the ESAF, so the sustainable sustainable fuel for airlines. It is an investment, but they are using this challenge as an opportunity to improve. And I think for me, when I read that, I see Finnair in a more positive light. I see them already in a positive light, but even more. So use this as an opportunity to kind of show where you can improve and where you can invest in improving the community and like basically the company from within and from outside. Secondly, I think a very important part is that everybody wants to be future proof. And if you do not keep track of, for example, your emissions, how can you be future proof within the different value chains that you're part of or in your own value chain? Costs are going to go up. And basically, if you're not ready to also be transparent about the initiatives that you take and improvements within your value chain of the greenhouse gas accounting, but other sustainability metrics, you are really not future proofing your company for the future. Because as we know, there will be at some point there will be basically consequences if you do not follow the different requirements that either your own your buyers are setting or the government is setting, especially in the Nordics. So before I kind of ask your feedback on the points that I mentioned, and maybe if you have any other examples, but just to kind of close out the key takeaways is that 2025 was really about compliance. We saw how the situation was with the omnibus discussions, with the CSRD discussions, and now we have a pathway forward. It's, of course, we know that it's a bit not what we wanted and not what we expected, but we have a pathway forward. But 2026 will really be about the capabilities of companies to use the data that they get from these requirements, from these reports, to really improve the value chain, make use cases of how improvements in value chain have been done so that you can sell it forward as well to other players in the market, and also use them as a USP, so a unique selling proposition to your consumers. I went a bit commercial towards the end, so maybe Eleanor, you from like a consulting point of view have more of a technical ideas on the different topics that we have outlined here.
I'm actually going to sneak in with a comment that we got in the chat while you talked about being transparent with if your emissions are rising. Be transparent, be humble, explain why. So Tom said, I agree with this. We have to help the clients understand the importance of the emissions we are showing them. Otherwise, they're just numbers on a screen. We have to put a meaning behind it. I think that's a really good point.
100%. And we have to make it into something of like actually substance, because if the situation is that you give people just numbers to look at and reports to fill, that's not going to get the internal buy-in. You need to make it something that they can then use to be proud of. And that's indeed, you have to inform your clients, but you have to inform your consumers that it's not just reporting, it's about getting improvements out of those reports. And that's how I see it. But I fully agree with your statement, Tom, and thanks for highlighting it as well.
Good.
And so just out of curiosity, because we allow, of course, better use of the reports, do you have any, how do you, when you discuss, for example, the results of your calculations with your clients, how do you usually position this, Elinor?
I think it's really easy to talk in terms of top 3, to really spread the word. These are your top 3 largest emission categories. And really, how do you say, put it in their head. You should be able to wake them up in the middle of the night and they should remember it. My old school teacher I had when I was like 7 said that all the time. You should be able to multiply these things in your head if I wake you in the middle of the night. So that's why I'm saying it. But it's a good way of thinking to spread the word to everyone that has some kind of connection, possibility to change processes, possibility to actually lower the emissions, to let them know these are the 3 largest emission categories. And that is a really, really good start and easy to communicate as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that we are towards the last 8 minutes of the webinar. So
and we have kept the time schedule, Eric. I'm so proud of us.
Yes, well, a little bit. We 2 minutes.
2 minutes. 2 minutes. That's good enough.
Yes, absolutely. So if you have any questions, now is your chance to write them in the Q&A or in the chat. I unfortunately, again, Elinor, I cannot see the chat currently, so I'm gonna rely on you to let me know if there's anything.
100%. We actually have one from Hanna here that I'm also really curious, because I think you have a statistic connected to this. I think we discussed it last week, so I hope you remember it. Otherwise, we can maybe share it afterwards. Do you think ambition in carbon accounting will diminish given omnibus, etc.?
I do not, and this is actually it's a really good question. We do have a nice graph of what our estimations are at Carbon+Alt+Delete, and the reality is that even if all of the reporting will kind of diminish, climate accounting is not going to go anywhere, and that's because it is such a key metric when it comes to sustainability reporting. And how we see it is that by 2030, the demand for carbon accounting is going to probably double. That's how we estimate it. And the reality of the matter is that sustainability consultants, for example, there is an X amount of them now, and every year, of course, more and more graduate, but the demand is going to go much faster than the offer of carbon accounting. So here, actually, we talk about technologies and so on and time awareness. This is where, for example, softwares come in. So it really is about having one consultant who can maybe tackle more projects in less time. And that's where, for example, softwares, but also have to be realistic, artificial intelligence comes in and other technologies. So it's a very good question. And I believe that the demand will just go up, but the technologies will basically have to help the current amount of carbon accountants to be able to tackle that demand, because the offer is not going to match the growth.
Yeah, 100%. And also comment on that, when I'm working with different ESG systems, so systems for carbon accounting, sustainability reporting, supply chain due diligence, 100% after Omnibus, I saw a reduction in the demand for the sustainability systems that were focusing more on the sustainability reporting and supply chain side. And during the spring, I also saw a reduction in demand of different kinds of systems for carbon accounting. But then after the summer, carbon accounting was moving upwards. And I think that's really connected to people thinking, oh, the time we don't have to spend on CSRD reporting now, we can use that time and not go back to the basics, but really making sure that the carbon calculations that you're already doing, that you're doing them well, that you're using your time in an efficient way, and that you are working on the quality. So I think that's one consequence of Omnibus.
Absolutely. So if you look at the screen right now, that's not the chart that carbon accounting is taking. Carbon accounting is just going to keep growing. And I will, after the webinar, I will kind of gather the different thoughts that we had, and I will also include that chart that we kind of have estimated, just to show as well how we see it growing. But indeed, the demand is there. Maybe it's a bit delayed because of the omnibus, but I think that now, especially, even if all of the requirements were watered down, because there is a way forward, a lot of companies will decide to still do it, because they know that it is a requirement even for bigger companies, and bigger companies will start demanding this from their value chain as well. So I do think that it's kind of going to trickle down the need for carbon accounting.
100%. And I think we can move on to the next slide.
Yes. So we have 3 minutes left. So I would love to also invite everybody to our future webinars. On the Thursday, April 23rd, we have the GHG protocol updates for the corporate standard webinar. These are available on our website, because I just realized that it says register here, but you do not have access to my screen. Well, our marketing manager will confirm to me afterwards if we send also the slides.
Yeah, Kai is sending out links here in the chat.
Yes, okay, perfect. Then the GHG protocol update scope 3 standard will be on Thursday, June 18th, so just before the summer holidays. Well, depends, of course. In the Nordics, we probably start a bit earlier. In September, we will discuss the net zero standard V2 for SBTI. And lastly, we have the GHG protocol updates, so the actions and market instruments, in Thursday, November 19th. So would love to have all of you join as well. It won't be me running these, so I will be among the crowd like yourselves.
That's amazing. And this was so fun doing with you, Eric.
We are going to, so we have to then plan one for the next year and do like carbon accounting, state of carbon accounting in the Nordics 2027, 2026. Yes, 27.
Let's do that 100%. And I'm also so happy that my computer didn't restart. So I think, oh, that's a win. And also really fun to talk with all of you guys today.
Absolutely. It's I think it's a sign that the computer did not start. And I see that we are right on time. So I would like to thank everybody for joining. Do you have any last statements from your side, Elinor?
Oh, no, just to thank you so much for this. It was really, really fun.
Absolutely. And I look forward to basically getting in touch. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us. More than happy to answer any questions. And also, I look forward to maybe discussing carbon accounting with you and so on. So please get in touch, or I might get in touch with you. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I wish you a great rest of the day.
Yeah, have a great lunch, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yes. Bon appetit.